Hello, everyone, and welcome to Behind Closed Doors, a podcast where we take a closer look at some of the social issues that impact people in powerful and personal ways. I'm your host, Kylee Rose, and my guest today is a friend of mine, Tate Kasmark.
Hello, everyone. I'm excited to learn more about this topic.
Today's topic is one that is incredibly important, but admittedly heavy: domestic violence, specifically looking at intimate partner violence. Before we begin, I wanted to offer a quick content warning. We're going to be talking about sensitive and heavy issues, including abuse, gender-based violence, and systemic inequality. These are difficult but necessary conversations. If you're not in the right headspace right now, take care of yourself and come back to this episode later. And remember, if you or someone you know is experiencing abuse, you are not alone. Resources are available, and we'll share them at the end of this episode. Let's start by laying a foundation. Domestic violence or intimate partner violence is a pattern of behaviors used by one partner to exert power and control over another. It isn't always physical. It can be emotional, sexual, financial, or psychological. It is important to never assume what one is going through, as domestic violence can come in an array of forms that all look different. The World Health Organization estimates that 20 to 50% of women worldwide will experience domestic violence in their lifetimes. In the U.S., a large government survey found that 44% of women and 25% of men have experienced contact sexual violence. This is discussed deeply in our textbook. Let that sink in for a second. That's nearly half of all women and a quarter of all men.
Wow, that is shocking. Are those numbers consistent across all groups?
Great question. No, certain populations are definitely more vulnerable. And that leads us into our next section, the social and structural factors that influence domestic violence. Let's start with socioeconomic status, which is the most powerful structural factor. Poverty, unemployment, low education, and crowded living conditions are all linked to higher rates of domestic violence. Women and families that face economic hardships are significantly more likely to suffer intimate partner violence. That's because financial stress increases tension in households and reduces survivors' ability to leave abusive situations. An emergency room study by Kylee and others found that partners of abused women were far more likely to have less than a high school education, unstable or intermittent employment, a recent job loss, or alcohol or substance abuse. In other words, economic insecurity is a key predictor of abuse.
What was the emergency room study? Can you explain a bit more about why this was important?
Definitely. So this study was researched, led by Dimitrios Kylee and colleagues. This analyzed data from 256 women who sustained injuries from domestic violence and 659 control women treated in emergency departments. The study aimed to identify partner characteristics most closely associated with an increased risk of injury to women due to domestic violence. The study identified several partner characteristics that were strongly associated with an increased risk of injury to women. These characteristics were alcohol abuse, drug abuse, unemployment rates, education, and former partners. These findings highlighted the significant role that certain partner characteristics play in the risk of injury to women from domestic violence.
That is really interesting research.
It definitely is. And what do you think happens when someone decides that they want to leave?
I'm not sure. What happens?
Often, there's nowhere to go. Many shelters are underfunded. Rural areas, especially, may have one or no shelter options. Survivors may face long wait lists, little to no legal aid, and economic abuse, where partners control their financial decisions. One anonymous survivor shared that when she was ready to leave, she had no car, no job, and 2 young kids. The closest shelter was over 50 miles away, and she had no one to watch her children, so she stayed for 2 more years.
That really puts things into perspective. It's not just about choosing to leave, it's about whether leaving is even possible.
Exactly. And sometimes well-intended policies can actually make things worse.
How so?
One great example of these policies is the mandatory arrest policy. In states like Arizona, Ohio, Alaska, and Oregon, mandatory arrest policies require police officers to arrest someone when responding to domestic violence calls. The original goal of this was to protect survivors and restrict personal judgment, which often led to inaction of the police officers. It was meant to send a strong message that domestic violence is a crime, not a private matter. But here's the problem. Survivors often don't want their abuser arrested. Some fear retaliation, others depend on their partner for financial support, and an immigrant survivor may fear deportation or involvement with the legal system. Even worse, officers sometimes arrest both people. This is called dual arrest, especially when the survivor fought back in the case of self-defense. This not only undermines the survivor's credibility, but can also result in child custody losses, job losses, and further trauma. Policies like this can deter reporting rather than encourage it, even if these policies were created to support reporting. This is where intersectionality comes in, a framework that looks at how different forms of oppression overlap. Let's look at race and class, for example. Studies show that Black individuals are 6.1 times more likely to be involved in domestic homicides rather than white individuals. But when socioeconomic status is taken into account, that number drops to 1.2. This suggests that the real driver is inequality, not race itself. Another recent study found that 32% of LGBTQ+, Black, Indigenous, and people of color teens experienced intimate partner violence compared to just 7.6% of their peers. That's more than 4 times the rate.
So when people face multiple layers of oppression, their risks increase?
Exactly. People with overlapping identities, like being LGBTQ+ and low income, often face greater stigma, less access to resources, and more barriers to help. That's why solutions that seem one size fits all just don't work. Culture also plays a role. In some communities, traditional gender roles encourage male dominance and female submission. These beliefs can normalize control, jealousy, or even violence. When women have less autonomy or economic independence, they're often seen as easier targets. On the other side, societies that promote gender equity and economic empowerment for women tend to have lower rates of domestic violence.
We don't hear about male survivors much. What about them?
Great point. In one large study in Portugal, 11.5% of intimate partner violence victims were men. The true number is likely higher, as male survivors often underreport due to shame or stigma. While men may experience less physical harm overall, they may suffer from psychological abuse, such as manipulation, emotional control, or verbal aggression. Public policy must address all survivors, regardless of gender. So the big question now, what can we do about it? First, educate yourself and others. Normalize talking about healthy relationships and red flags. Share resources, check in with your friends, not just about when they're struggling, but when they go quiet. Second, support organizations that provide shelter, legal aid, and trauma-informed counseling. Some of these organizations in Arizona are Eve's Place, A New Leaf, Arizona Coalition to End Sexual and Domestic Violence. You can also support national organizations like Futures Without Violence and Rape, and as well as Abuse and Incest National Network. Even shopping at Fry's and Amazon Smile for your daily needs will allow a portion of your sales to be donated to domestic violence support organizations. And finally, listen without judgment. Survivors do not need advice. They need to be seen, believed, and respected. Of course, everyone is different, so do not treat everyone like they are the same. I just wanted to do a quick reflection moment as well before we wrap up this podcast. Imagine if every decision in your day-to-day life, when to eat, where to go, who to see has to be filtered through fear. That's what it's like for many survivors.
What resources can people reach out to?
That's a good question. If you or someone you know needs support, please consider these resources. The National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233, the hotline.org for online chats and safety planning, Strong Hearts Native Helpline, specifically made for American Indian and Alaska Native communities at 1-844-7-NATIVE, as well as RAINN for sexual assault survivors. This is RANN.org. You are not alone. Help is available. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Behind Closed Doors. I hope you walk away with a better understanding of how domestic violence is not just about personal choices, but about the systems, structures, and cultures we live in. Please share this episode with someone. Reflect, talk about it, let's break the silence and stigma together. Until next time, stay safe, be kind, and take care of one another. Thank you.
Thank you.